What's going on, everybody? So what I got in front of me today is a 2009 Kawasaki KZ250. What I got going on with this thing, I just did another video on cleaning the carburetor. I got it cleaned, got it installed in the bike, got a chance to test drive it. And what it's doing is you can hear it popping at idle. It's got erratic idle, idles up and down, kind of all over the place, and it never really settles down. And the only way that I was able to get the idle to settle down and to get it to run pretty good is to turn the air screw out about 3.5 to 4 turns. So that's a pretty clear indication that we need to richen up the pilot circuit. So what I'm going to do is, because factory position on this is about 2.5 turns, if you have to go more than 3 turns, that's a good indication you need to go up one size in the pilot jet. And also too, it's starting to cut out a little bit above half throttle, around 3/4 throttle. It's cutting out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and go up one size on the main jet as well. So a great part about these KZ series bikes is they have the opening in the frame enough for you to be able to loosen the clamps on the inlet and outlet side of the carburetor. Rotate the carburetor clockwise if you're looking at the back of the motor, and pull the bowl off and change out the jets without having to pull out the carburetor. So you don't have to loosen up your air box or take any of your fenders or the seat off. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to turn our fuel off up here. And then we're going to take a Phillips screwdriver and loosen up the front and rear clamps on the air box and on the intake boot. And we're not going to completely take these out. We're just going to loosen them up enough to where we can rotate the carburetor around. Okay, that ought to be good. So we're going to grab the carburetor and rotate it around. We're going to push some hoses out of the way and pull these drain tubes up to get it to rotate enough to get to the bottom of the carburetor so we can get to the 4 screws on the bowl. So now that we got it tilted up, we're going to grab an Allen wrench and loosen up the drain screw on the bottom of the carburetor to drain out the remaining fuel that's in the bowl. Let me grab some Allen wrenches. Okay, so we got no fuel, or very little fuel coming out of there. It's just trickling out. I think that hose might be clogged up because this bowl should be full of fuel. So we'll put our drain screw back in, rotate it back up out of the way. And since I had these screws off, I did not torque them intentionally. And so I'm able to drop the bowl screws without using an impact driver. And I let these loose because I kind of figured I'd have to rejet this because this particular customer runs this bike year round, and he runs it all different locations and changing altitudes. So I have a set of jets for this, a good variety of jets laying around just to be able to rejet it when I need to on the fly. Okay, let me go grab a longer handled screwdriver. Alright, that's not getting it either. Let me go grab my impact driver. Okay, took an impact hammer, got that last screw loosened up. Take a long handled screwdriver. Take the last screw out. Then drop the bowl down. Take the proper size wrench or small crescent wrench and loosen up the main jet. Okay, let me go grab a socket. The main jet came off the housing and so it's stuck up in there. I'll be right back. Okay, got a 5/16 socket, extension and 1/4 inch driver. We'll loosen up the jet. Pull it out, and now we can get to our pilot jet. And then on the pilot jet, it's probably not going to show up on the camera. So this is a number 40 that's in here, and we need to go up one size. So what I do, I order pilots by the set. You can buy them individually if you know exactly what size you need. I always order these in a set of 10. Which gives you all the common sizes or all the sizes available before you get into custom sizes. And it's usually a couple bucks more to get the set versus getting an individual jet. It's definitely more cost effective to order a set versus individual ones. Okay, let me sort through all the jets. I'll be right back. Okay, got a number 42 jet, which is one size up from the 40 that was in there. We'll slide it in. So give me just a second, something doesn't feel right. Make sure I got the right type of jets. Okay, got the pilot jet in there. It just had some, I guess some metal shavings on the threads from when they sent me the jets. But I cleaned the threads off and it went right in. So there's a 182 main currently in the bike. I'm going to go up to a 185, which is what I have in here now. We'll put our plastic cap back on. And thread it in our main jet. Snug it down. And another thing, while I got this open, the customer that owns this bike was had a complaint that it starts to cut out on extremely steep inclines. So what I'm going to try and do is adjust the float level up just a hair, because a lot of times what happens when you're riding the bike, if you get on an incline, the carburetor is now at an incline. So if the fuel level isn't high enough, you'll start starving out the front jets in the carburetor. So the way to compensate for that is to raise the fuel level in the bowl or lower the tang on the float to allow more fuel in the bowl, so that when you get at a steeper incline, it still has enough fuel to suck up into the jets and you're not pulling air into the jets. Okay. Let me go grab a pick, I'll be right back. Okay, so it's got the little tang on the float, and then you got your float needle valve or float valve that sits right here. The float valve sits on the little tang, and so if you can imagine, the float sits in the carburetor like this. As fuel drains out of the carburetor, the float's going to drop down. It's going to pull this little valve open. It's going to open the seat and allow the bowl to fill up. As the bowl gets up to level, it's going to raise this float, which is going to push this needle up and close the valve. So in order for you to get a higher fuel level in the bowl, you have to push that tang down. So it's just the opposite. You push it down to increase the level, you push it up to increase the level. And you only want to move that just a little bit, because a minor adjustment the wrong way could either make it starve for fuel or it will overflow and run out the drain tube. Okay, we got the float back in, we got the float valve back in, all of our jets are tightened up, we got our pin put back in. So we're going to grab our bowl and reinstall it. This is the downside to doing it like this versus pulling the carburetor off, is you got to kind of finagle everything into place. But if all you're doing is changing a jet or two or making a minor adjustment, this saves you a ton of time, because it's a real pain to get this carburetor out and put it back in. Get our idle adjusting knob put back in. We'll start the screw. Just snug it up a little bit. Okay, got everything back in, got all the screws in, tightened down. While you're down here, this little, the air idle screw adjustment, the screw itself is down here on the bowl. So since you got to turn sideways, it's easier to get a long bladed, small flat blade screwdriver in there. Go ahead and close that thing all the way down, turn it all the way clockwise, get it tightened or just snugged up. You don't want to crank it down. And then you're going to go back counterclockwise 2.5 turns, which is the factory setting. Now, I went 2 turns on this one because we went up 1 jet size. So that 2.5 turns is not set in stone. That's just a starting point. I have enough experience with these bikes. I think 2 turns is going to put it right where it needs to be with the exhaust that's on here and the intake that's on here. So we'll go ahead and get the carburetor rotated around. Get our clamps tightened back up. So then, turn your fuel on, you let the bowl fill up, you watch it for a few minutes. If you adjusted your fuel level, your float level, you'll know if it's too full because it'll start to overrun out of these drain tubes. So I generally turn the fuel on, let it sit for about 10 minutes. As long as it doesn't leak any fuel on the ground, that's probably, the float is about where I need it to be, especially if I just made a minor adjustment. If it starts to overflow, I need to go the other way with that little tang on the float to get the valve to close sooner rather than later. And so we'll turn the fuel on, let it sit. I'll roll this thing outside, start it up, let it warm up, get it up to operational temperature, about 150, 200 degrees. And then we'll adjust that adjust that air idle screw a little bit, depending on what the exhaust is doing. So if you turn it up, or you start the bike up, you warm it up. If it's popping out of the exhaust, or if you blip the throttle and it kind of hangs there for a second, or the idle is high or takes a while to go or to settle back down, that's an indication that screw is still a little bit too lean. So you'll go counterclockwise on the screw, which will richen it up a little bit, and you keep adjusting it little by little, about 1/8 to 1/4 turn at a time. You don't want to go too much until when you tap that throttle, the idle goes up and comes right back down very quickly. That's generally how you set that needle. If you go too far with it, make it too rich, it'll start bogging down at idle and you'll have problems getting a stable idle, and you'll constantly be adjusting your idle screw, your idle adjuster. So you want to set this jet first. Make sure you have a nice, smooth, stable idle. It's okay if it's a little higher than where it needs to be, but you don't want to adjust your throttle or your idle adjustment knob until you get this jet set properly. Otherwise, you're just going to be fighting them back and forth. So you set this jet first. Make sure your idle's nice and smooth and kind of leveled out. Once it's up to operating temperature and it's ran for a few minutes with this jet adjustment, and you're confident that it's where it needs to be, then you turn your idle screw down a little bit, bring the idle down to a normal level, take it out for a test ride, make sure it runs good. So that's pretty much it for adjusting the pilot jets and changing out pilot jets for larger ones. If you got any questions, post them below. If you have any requests for videos or you want to see anything, also post that below or send me a message. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more stuff. We'll see you next time.